The very first episode on this channel was titled I Dreamed Death. It was basically about precognitive dreams that predicted or hinted at an impending death. Today I'm taking up the same theme again. By the way, if you missed the first episode, I'll leave the link in the description and at the corner of the screen. Whether you believe our dream could signify something or not aside, one thing true is there's nothing more critical in our life than the matter of life and death. And should our dream have any power to forewarn, I guess there's nothing more important subject than the impending death. Today, we are going to read stories about such dreams. Some merely hinted what was to come, some actually helped to avoid a fatal instant, and some, despite of all, failed to save the life. Whatever the case, I think they could make you reconsider about the power of dreams. In Korean culture, there's quite a strong belief that dreams could mean something, that there's a whole perceived lexicon of what in our dreams signifies what. In today's stories alone, you'd find a few such symbolisms mentioned repeatedly. Most notably that losing a tooth means losing a close person, taking a bus means a journey to the underworld, and men in black mean none other than Grim Reapers themselves. Today's collection is mostly shorter, anecdotal stories. So, here are 10 allegedly true stories about precognitive dreams that predicted impending death. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by a host, Anthony. About 5-6 years ago, my grandma had a dream. There, she found herself back in her maiden home. Out of blue, a soldier barged in without bothering to knock or ring the bell. He handed Grandma something wrapped in a piece of cloth and barged out as quickly as he came in. Curious, Grandma was about to unwrap the bundle. No! It was her mother that shouted. Her mother snatched the bundle from Grandma and threw it out. But just then, Grandma's younger sister was returning home and unwittingly caught the bundle. Next moment, a big tiger appeared from the garden and dragged Grandma's sister away, leaving the echoing trail of her terrible scream. Grandma woke up from the dream disturbed and was nervous what this foreboding dream should signify. But she didn't need to wonder for long because just later in the day, the news arrived that her younger sister passed away. I went to high school in the early 90s, and this is a story about a classmate. One day he didn't come to school. Later we heard that was because his mother passed away. We knew his mother hadn't been well, but it nonetheless stirred us. By all means, we were yet too young to lose a parent. 3 days later, he came back to school, and we all somewhat awkwardly tried to console him. It was still a few months later that he talked about the dream he had a night before his mother passed. In the dream, he was waiting for the bus number 30. It was still early in the morning, and he didn't even know where he was going to, but just waited and waited. The bus came first was number 30-1. Its route roughly overlapped that of number 30 bus, so he hoped on it anyway. All the seats in the bus were already full, except for one. 2 rows behind the drivers. Oh cool, I could sit there, he thought, when somebody called out for him loudly. It was his mother. She rushed in and pulled my mate back by the collar. "Oh, Mom, what are you doing? I have to take this bus," Mate protested. But his mother just downright pushed him out of the bus like a mad woman. In the end, Mate was thrown out back onto the street, and the door closed before his mother got off. He looked back and only then realized all the passengers in the bus had no features on their face. His mother waved at him with teary face as if to tell him to go back home, and sat herself on that one last seat. Mate went at the bus door to open it, but he woke up before he could, and his mother passed away that day. For quite some time, poor Mate suffered the sense of guilt that his mother sacrificed herself for him. And I and other mates had a bit of a trauma about number 30-1 bus. My friend is, something. One time, a nightmare woke him up and caught a robber in the middle of breaking in. Or other time, woke up from a dream of his teeth all falling out. He quickly called his parents back home, and as they talked about the weird dream, saw the breaking news of Daegu Metro fire reported live. Those would be more lucky cases, but sadly, his uncanny dreams do not save the day all the time. When he was 15, he got a dream. Nothing special. He was on the way home from school as any day. On the way is his local beauty salon, and the hairdresser's little son was playing with a ball in front of the salon. My friend had seen and known the boy from when the boy was a toddler, and they were quite friendly. He woke up from the dream at that point and didn't think much of it, other than it was so vivid that it all felt surreal. Following night, he was back in the same situation in the dream. On the way home, the familiar beauty salon and the hairdresser's boy playing. Then, he saw a big lorry truck rolling in from the other side of the road. Another night. Friend was back in the same place in the dream again. Except this time, the truck was heading straight towards him, and he woke up with a startle. It was still early hours of the morning, so he fell back to sleep, and he was straight back in the same dream. He managed to step aside from the running truck, but it still carried on and hit the little boy. I still remember the friend talked about the series of dreams to me that day. I didn't fully understand the unusual significance of his dreams in general, and just commented, "What a funny dream." That same evening, friend was on the way back home, and suddenly got the strange sensation of déjà vu. A truck was approaching from the other side of the road, and a little boy was playing in front of the hair salon. "Hi," the boy said brightly to my friend. I have to save him, friend thought. But it was too late. Even before he could dash towards him, the truck ran over the poor boy. My friend saw the aftermath firsthand, of the boy's skull popped open and his brain matter spilling out. The boy's mother ran out, saw it, covered the body of her boy with a barber's cape, and screamed that nobody should come near. That's already 5 years ago. But my friend says he still gets nightmares about the day, especially the last smile of the boy saying hi to him. Do you remember the gas explosion disaster in Daegu in 1995? During the construction of a new metro station, they ruptured the underground gas pipe and it led to a major explosion. Unfortunately, it took place during the busy morning rush hour and it claimed 101 lives, half of which were young students. I could very well have been one of them. I was then a middle school student. The night before the fateful day, my family had a memorial ritual for my late grandpa. Grandma stayed overnight for the occasion, and in the morning, Dad could not give me a ride to school as usual because he had to bring Grandma back home. So I chose to take a bus to school instead. When the bus arrived, and I had already one foot in the bus, I suddenly remembered the dream from the previous night and backed away. In the dream, I was trying to catch a bus back home from school. There was a bus stop right in front of the school, but it was served by a single bus number and it got, as usual, much too crowded. After letting a couple of buses go because they were already full, I decided to walk further out to another bus stop on the bigger road, which was served by a lot more different bus numbers. But strangely, the bus number that should serve the stop in front of the school came to that stop at the bigger road. And yet, not suspecting anything, I took it, and when it reached the long stretch of the main road, boom! It suddenly exploded. And the bus I was about to take that morning was the same bus number in the dream. I frankly scoffed at myself a little after the bus left. Letting a bus go in the busy morning because of some random dream? Oh well, there still was a bit of time, and I thought to catch the next bus. But before I could, a friend who was getting a ride from his dad saw me at the bus stop and picked me up. His dad took an alternative route because the main road was more congested than usual due to the metro construction. And just as we were about to enter the school building, there was a loud boom, enough to rattle all the windows of the building. It was of course well before the time of mobiles and internet, so we all just wondered what that was. It was clear something was very wrong. Teachers didn't come to the classroom. Some adults, who must have been parents, rushed in and out searching for their kids. Soon, rumor floated around that there was an accident, but we still didn't know what kind or where. The school wrapped up before the lunchtime, and we were told to go straight back home. But no matter how long we waited, the usual bus didn't come. Later I learned that was because the road was blocked. In the end, I decided to walk back. And when I reached the Sangin crossroad, the scene of destruction, broken windows, buildings with crumbling facades. Various spots were already covered with blue plastic sheets, but they could not hide all the debris, blood stains, or the strange metallic smell floating around the air. More than 20 years later, I still remember the scene clearly. Probably because I realized that I could very well have passed that road if I took the bus that morning. Back home, I told Mom about the dream. Mom said it probably was my late grandpa that saved me with a precognitive dream. After all, the previous night was his memorial ritual. I'm not sure. All I can say is I was incredibly lucky to be alive. It's already from 5 years ago. One night, I went to bed shortly before midnight as usual. Just before I fell asleep, I was disturbed by the sound of thuds from the ceiling. My family home is a flat on the top floor of the building, and by fact I know some delinquents occasionally sneaked up the rooftop to drink and smoke. I just thought it was the case again. Bit irritated for my sleep having been disturbed, I was just lying there looking at the window, whose full view was in my sight from where I lied down. And I saw something. No, to be exact, our eyes interlocked for a split second. It looked like a person falling down. I was startled and froze a while. But there was no sound following that. Had a person really fallen, it should have made a significant noise upon hitting the ground. I tried to convince myself that it was just a dream from my half-asleep state. In the morning, there was no news of any accident, so I thought it was indeed just a dream. In the afternoon, as I was approaching my building, a loud pop was heard from my back. Like a ball popping or a watermelon crushing. I myself thought it was gas explosion and looked back. No. It was a person. A teenage girl on the ground. I was frozen stuck there while the security guy ran around to call the emergency and people gathering up to see what it was. Maybe it was the shock. At the time, I didn't feel anything particular. But in my mind, I just kept rewinding the previous night's vision. The eyes that met mine outside the window. Was it a precognitive dream? My mother sometimes has a dream that foretells the future. One summer, she saw her late mother-in-law, my grandma, in her dream. Grandma was wearing a bathing suit and drenching wet. She didn't say anything but just stared at Mom before she disappeared again. I do remember Mom told me about the dream the next morning, but I didn't think it should mean anything particular. A month later, my family visited Grandma's tomb for Chuseok holiday, and I heard adults worryingly discussing that there was a sign of water having flown by next to the tomb, probably formed during the summer downpour. Water must have got all the way into the coffin, and we should dig a trench around the tomb to divert the water flow away. I suddenly reminded myself of Mom's dream a month earlier, and realized it must have meant this. Probably I got Mom's gene, and I also sometimes get a precognitive dream, if not as frequently as Mom. In one such a dream, a lower tooth just broke off and rolled about in my mouth. For some reason, I felt I mustn't spit the broken teeth out, so I went through the rest of the dream with the teeth in my mouth like a candy. Only when I woke up, I remembered that losing a tooth in a dream usually signifies an impending doom, specifically a death in the family. Losing an upper tooth would mean losing a male family member and a lower tooth a female member. It felt ominous, but at least I didn't spit it out, so maybe it shouldn't be too bad, I thought. And right that afternoon, my older sister, who'd been suffering persistent coughs a while, was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Fortunately, it was relatively early stage, but it still took months on medication to recover. I still make a joke to my sister that it was I who saved her life. Had I spitted the broken teeth out? My mom had a dream when she was young. In the dream, she was lost in a dense forest covered with a thick fog. When she managed to get out of the forest, she found a little rowing boat at the shore of a big river. She rowed across the river and then met a creaking wooden door. She opened it, only to meet another wooden door. Opened it, yet another identical door. Opened it, yet another, yet another, yet another. She doesn't remember how many doors she opened, and when she sensed it was finally the last door, she woke up from the dream before she could open it. A couple of days after the dream, she was waiting for a bus. It was a foggy day and the bus was long overdue. An expensive-looking car stopped in front of her and rolled down the window, revealing a handsome guy in a casual but expensive-looking attire.
"Where are you heading to? May I give you a lift?"
the guy said. Mom politely turned it down, but the man was persistent. There was still no sign of her boss, and it was getting late for her appointment. She was indeed tempted just to take the man's offer, but just then she saw the bus coming from afar. The man watched Mom on as if to check whether Mom would really take the bus or not. Sometime later, the whole nation was shook by the murder case in Walmido, Incheon. But Mom's shock was even bigger, because the perpetrator shown in the news was the very guy in the expensive car. Only later she learned, on the way to the underworld, one has to pass through numerous doors. Thank God she woke up before she opened the last door. My family immigrated to US, including my grandparents. Now I live by myself, but when I miss homemade meal and cozy family environment, I visit my grandparents. They live in a small 2-room apartment in downtown LA and always heartily welcome me when I visit them. When I'm by myself, I would habitually stay up till 3-4 in the morning, but at my grandparents', I would soundly fall asleep by midnight. I guess the warm environment relaxes me so much. But recently, I had this dream when I stayed with them. From the beginning, I sensed it was a dream. I and Grandpa was in the room, and Grandma was knitting on the balcony. Suddenly, Grandpa, unlike his usual gentle self, bursted out angrily to open the door. I hurriedly tried the room door, but it was locked. I tried the door to the balcony that extended over to the next room, but that was locked too. All the while, Granny was knitting away, oblivious of Grandpa's rage or me desperately trying the door. Then she called out to Grandpa,
"I think somebody's at the door."
To which Grandpa shouted angrily,
"Don't answer it!"
"But he's in already,"
Granny said. And with that, a middle-aged black guy burst into the balcony and took Granny away. It was a weird dream. I felt so disturbed that I ran straight to sleeping Granny to check if she was fine. Granny is a bit superstitious, as many are in her generation, so I told her about the dream at the breakfast table. She seemed not taking it too seriously. "You must be feeling stressed these days. It can make you get such a dream," she said. And the following is what Granny later recounted. That same afternoon, she had an appointment with a doctor. She waited for a bus as usual, but when she saw the driver was a middle-aged black guy, she somehow reminded herself of my dream and decided to catch the next bus instead. When she got back home, she heard the local news reporting on a bus crash in the center of LA, which resulted in many a fatality, including its driver. My family moved to this house recently, and ever since I get lots of sleep paralysis. Perhaps something is up with the place. And just yesterday, I went to bed with my pet dog as usual, but for some reason my dog would keep barking and jumping off the bed, basically refusing to sleep with me. Well, what could I do? I just fell asleep by myself and had a dream. I was fighting with some weird guy who literally looked like the character in the Japanese manga Angel Densetsu. Anyway, I was clearly winning it, and even in the dream I was getting excited. And the moment I was about to blow the one last fatal punch, my opponent laughed out loud like a madman and said,
You are dead, stupid.
The situation flipped all at once, and I was down from the raining punches from him. And it really hurt. Every time a punch landed on my face, I screamed with pain. And when he seemed about to blow the one last big one, somebody grabbed his hand to stop it. And the next thing I knew was my dad was waking me up. And I found myself bleeding from my forehead and my room all messy. There was a shelf right above my bed head, and the nail that was holding it got apparently loose, and the shelf started tilting, with the objects on the shelf falling down on me one by one. At the end of it, the shelf itself fell too, but thank God it missed me. I shivered to think it wouldn't have just ended with a bleeding forehead if it had fallen on me. My dog that refused to sleep on my bed that particular night, and the dream that uncannily mirrored what happened in reality. I'm a bit scared to sleep tonight. My first nephew suffered ill health when he was little. His mom, my older sister, of course had to dedicate herself to take care of him, and the plan for another child was postponed indefinitely. It was only when the nephew got healthy again and started nagging for a baby brother that my sister and her husband finally decided to try for another child. When sister announced that she was pregnant, we all were happy. She was by then already in her mid-30s, and she seemed to think it was her last good chance. But the happy anticipation didn't last long. Into the second month of the pregnancy, sister miscarried the baby. There was no significant incident or cause either. She just had a pain in her abdomen, and when she visited her doctor, the baby was lost already. It was a very sad news for us all, and a tragic time for sister's family. But there was one creepy element to this tragedy. On the day my sister lost her baby, my wife woke up from her sleep with a startle. She had a nightmare. My wife is not very sensitive and usually doesn't care much about dreams or superstitions at all. But it was different that morning. She was still shaking and almost teary even after I held her in my arms and told her it was just a dream. In the dream, wife was home. We live on the first floor, and above us is just a rooftop. And in the dream, she heard a group of people walk past our door and take stairs up to the rooftop. Wondering who those could be, wife went up to the rooftop herself. There was a group of guys, all in black attire. One of them was holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. They discussed something among themselves back and forth until they reached some sort of conclusion. Then they tossed the baby off the parapet down to the ground. They turned to my wife as if they'd known she was watching the whole time and smirked creepily. My wife panicked and rushed down, hoping to save the baby. But alas, it was too late. Baby fell right in front of her and died. You can imagine how much more my wife was disturbed when she heard the sad news of my sister's miscarriage later the same day. It was of course years later that I mentioned the wife's dream to my sister. Sister's face turned pale and said, "I too had a dream for a few days prior to my miscarriage. A group of men in black would come to me and passed around, giving me unpleasant smirks and whispering something unintelligible constantly. I would get irritated and try to push them away. Then they would disappear like a smoke, only to return the following night again. Could they have been the same guys in your wife's dream? And all those whispers were the discussion to throw down my baby?" Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I quite like the subject of dream. As I've gone through some stress and difficult times in recent months, I notice my dreams have got much more vivid. I don't think my dreams should mean something in particular, but I kind of enjoy them, even the not-so-pleasant ones. I guess that's because dreams are usually the only time I get closest to something fantastical. Do you have lots of vivid dreams? What was the most recent memorable one? If you enjoyed my work, please give it a big thumbs up and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. My channel has been up and running now for 5 years, but I'm still very much hungry for your love and support. If you'd support me more directly, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account, the link's in the description, or there's also a Super Thanks option here on YouTube for a small donation. Thank you. Until next Sunday, stay safe and take care.